listening to The Kula Ring, a podcast made for manufacturing marketers. Here are Carman Perry and Jeff White.
Welcome to The Kula Ring, a podcast for manufacturing marketers brought to you by Kula Partners. My name is Jeff White, and joining me today is Carman Perry. Carman, how you doing, sir?
I'm out of practice, and you?
Yeah, indeed. We've been playing some old favorite episodes and republishing some stuff from earlier in the year with a big push to begin recording some new stuff for 2023. And it's been a bit. It's been a minute, as they say. Yeah.
So no pressure on today's guest, but you kind of have to set the tone for the entire year now.
It's like season 5 starting out. Yeah. It's a pilot. Yeah. Which anytime anybody says something's a pilot, I always think of that exchange early in Pulp Fiction. And when Samuel
What's
Jackson
a pilot?
says, "What's a pilot?" He goes, "It's if they sell that show and people like it, no, I don't watch TV." And he goes, "Well, you are aware that there is this invention called television, and on this invention they show shows," which I always thought was a really weird way of saying it, but here we are.
See, this is where I feel like you're just going to bring up the movie thing so you can like completely impress with your knowledge contrasted to my lack thereof about such a thing. But so you win that round.
Well, if we get into Dylan lyrics, you'll be top of mind.
There you go. I'll see if I can turn it to that eventually. Why don't we introduce today's guests, though?
Absolutely. So joining us today is Rob Patey. Rob is the Global Marketing Director for BALYO. Welcome to the Kula Ring, Rob.
Well, thank you. And you pronounced Patey correctly, which happens about 1 in 10 cases. So I appreciate it.
Really? What are the alternatives?
Patey, Patty, and then I'll often get people thinking it's a typo and just go right for Patel.
Oh, actually, that's what my iPhone did when I tried to reply.
Yeah.
Or when I was searching you out. So, yeah. Huh. Yeah, no, Carman can relate to this.
People see me, I'm 6'5" and blonde, so they know that the Patel is probably off. So, yeah.
Yeah.
In this digital age, things are different, though. You're getting introduced blindly.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, look, Rob, let's learn more about the company and how you found your way there.
All right, fantastic. Yeah, so BALYO is a manufacturer of robots, essentially. So we take standard forklift trucks and we make them completely autonomous. So that means no drivers, all robot guidance, all robot pick and place of pallets. How I found myself there was essentially I had spent 15, 18 years, I hate going through the numbers at this point, in software and IT marketing. Most recently doing a 10-year stint at IBM and then 2 years with an agency just because I wanted to peek behind the veil and see what you guys do in the agency world. I'd been paying for SOWs for 20 years, so I wanted to see what all those line items actually meant. Agency shifted direction, so we parted ways. And then I went out on LinkedIn with my "Will Work for Food" sign, and BALYO actually found me.
Oh, very cool. It's an interesting shift from we won't even stop at the agency experience side of it. It would suggest it's an interesting jump from a fairly long stint in career in software and tech into, I guess, somebody that's kind of quasi-manufacturing space, but very technical too. I mean, it's not like you're in a low-tech space.
No, there's a definitive software and technology bend to what we do. I would say we are as much a software company as we are an equipment company, probably more so.
Yeah.
We're getting the standard base trucks from our OEM partners, but really the magic is happening with the software and the intelligence that we apply to the machine. So that's very much within my bailiwick. And as far as moving from software and IT services, I'll be honest with you, if I had to write scalable, flexible, or cloud one more time in my career, I probably would just throw my head into the screen. So I was definitely ready for that mid-career shift into something new and something different to actually try to wax poetic about and push out into the market.
I think it's important to pause there, Rob, and just say I think it's good for people to hear what you just said, because too many marketers think like they push to be in tech, or they don't think about they wouldn't think about a robotic forklift company as being as exciting potentially, and what they're not really seeing is that the world of software and tech isn't necessarily bright lights in a big city either.
No, and I think what people get wrapped in, and they'll do this even within software and tech, is that they will find their niche. Like I'll definitely use cybersecurity as an example, because that's the last group I was in with IBM. A lot of people, there's such a bifurcation, trifurcation of what you can market in software and technology that people even get stuck in what I'll call those micro ruts, right? Of I'm just going to do, mobile device management. I'm just going to do cybersecurity. I'm just going to do ERP systems, right? So they even get stuck within those micro niches of what we can do. And I think what they forget is that people are people, right? And we're always marketing to people. And that's the fundamental. You'll learn all of the other stuff as long as you have the core group of skills in place and you know what you're doing from the marketing standpoint. I don't want to say what you're marketing doesn't matter, but it's certainly not as important as having the tactical skills to get the job done.
I mean, obviously, you learned some things on the agency along the way, but as you came into more of a manufacturing marketing role, what are the differences that you're seeing, compared to what you were experiencing at IBM?
One of the big differences I'm seeing, if I look at what we did at IBM and even before that, digital was our primary focus. It was all digital all the time. And I'll say that manufacturing really hasn't caught up to that yet. Manufacturing is still, I don't want to say an early 2000s game, but I marvel at the number of trades and associations and the power and sway that they still hold over, especially your brand awareness and getting your name out into the market. I also marvel at the fact that they all have similar names. I mean, I will confuse them on a daily basis. There's materials handling, there's handling materials, there's supply chain and demand, there's demand for supply chains. It's boggling. I just recently received a press list from or a trade list from one of the shows that we're doing, and there's over 600 different trade publications that are coming to this. And again, the names just, you really have to squint to be able to see the difference between them.
And man, I don't know what you find, but so not to lead the witness too much, I'll just tell you what have found with it is that most of them overstate their effectiveness in reaching their
Of
audience,
course.
and overstate it digitally, and they're still getting away with it, whereas in other categories that just wouldn't be the case. Like they're still getting away with charging exorbitant rates for almost no reach in a digital property that's 20 years
Our
behind.
newsletter is seen by 2,000 eyeballs.
Yeah, or whatever.
And I read these newsletters and they just seem to be like, Sears catalogs. Let's date ourselves and age ourselves, why don't we? But they just seem to be just catalogs of ads. And that's really where you've got to say to yourself, what is the traction I'm getting from my presence in these? And we have so many tools available to us as marketers today to be able to say, let's take a look at your referring sites, go into your HubSpot, go into, whatever your CRM is or whatever your marketing automation is, and see where your referring sites are coming from. And are you getting any traction coming in from these domains, especially because, they're producing these things in digital issues. You should be able to see that they're coming, if people are actually clicking the link in the ad or clicking, the QR code that you're putting in there. You really have to monitor and manage that yourself as a marketer to make sure that you're getting any kind of, ROI off of what you're spending.
Rob, how long have you been with the company right now?
No, okay, we're gonna go there. A whopping 4 months.
Yeah, so it's early days, and I think that's important to note because
Absolutely.
I guess my guess is that you're starting to see some of the enough data to begin to question some of that trade spend.
Oh, that was month one.
Yeah.
So this was almost like a reverse order for me as far as coming into this job, and that I know I had the marketing skills and I know I had that prowess. And what's going to be the long tail for me is learning the industry itself, learning the lingo, learning, all those subtle nuances I took for granted in IT and software. But again, those marketing principles were, those marketing practices, I should say, are something that I could really get into and attack in my first 90 days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how the marketing evolves with you at the helm. And uh, I've got to think the category you're in gives you a bit of permission. I mean, you're marketing robots, which has,
Right.
which I think, obviously gives you permission to enter the digital space, maybe more than what some more traditional manufacturers might.
Quite possibly. I mean, it's a matter of really kind of going to where the audience is. And just because I'm marketing robots does not mean that my buyers, my prospects still might be flipping through all these trade magazines, for instance. So, I mean, that's still something I have to keep an eye on. But, I'm using that as a specific example. If I look at, again, the biggest arsenal and the biggest tool we have, it's the same from marketer to marketer to marketer, and that's search. I mean, let's be frank with each other. Search is the cash cow.
And that's a game that's changing quite rapidly.
Search it has and it hasn't. I mean, there is always that element of search in that, you are in it for a pay to play, right? I mean, they have, Google will always go in and they'll update how they present the ads and what ads are presented. But I mean, it has always been an auction house, right? Even from day one. I remember when I invested in my very first Google campaign, it was back in 2004, 2003. And I spent a whopping $100,000 with them for the year. They treated me like the king of the castle. I mean, the Google swag that I got for the office was, it came in boxes and crates. A year and a half later, I had a hard time getting anybody to talk to me on the phone with what became then my paltry $100,000 spend.
It when I say it's changing, I guess I could take the whole podcast over and kind of begin to imagine where search is going as we start to see reports of Chat GPT, for instance, being integrated into Bing. Um, Interesting to imagine what that could rapidly do to search.
Sure.
And Google's position in it, but nevertheless, uh, I, I'm kind of curious. I mean, the market that you're marketing into, material handling, um, I wouldn't say that they're stuck in their ways, but there's, I think that would be maybe inaccurate. But I think the idea of getting robots integrated into that space isn't something that I think maybe a lot of people that have a warehouse or whatever don't necessarily think that that's open to them, or maybe that's possible for them yet. I guess how much of that kind of missionary work are you doing, and kind of just getting
A
the
lot of it.
people to understand the marketing potential of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's, obviously our jobs, if we want to put it in the two highest categories, it's brand and demand, right? So, that education that robots for you, robots are easy. I mean, what is stopping people from changing? It's a fear of change, let's be honest, right? That sort of boils down to. So then you need to look at what those fear factors are and what those drivers are. And it's always seen as a matter of complexity. So specifically at BALYO, we are working to really show people that it's simple, right? You can change simply. You can simply change over to robots, and it's not going to disrupt your operations and processes as much as you believe it will. Because if you look at everything on paper, robots make perfect sense. I mean, from a safety perspective, from an ROI perspective over time, right? When you account for labor and damage to goods and things like that, I mean, robots simply make sense to make the move over. It's all those ancillary things of the management of the robots, the setup of the robots. That's what's giving people the biggest amount of consternation.
That makes sense to me.
Good. All right. So you guys are my test audience for messaging. So thank you for validating.
But uh, I get, who are you finding to be the earliest adopters, or those kind of those segments that are most receptive to your message right now?
Your pioneers, of course, are your large organizations. I mean, they're always going to be. They're the ones that have, they can afford the time, they can afford the resources to really get into the project and understand it and be able to, develop and deploy it and, work with you as a partner on it. They get the most leeway to be pioneers, right? And it's that way in the software industry. It's I don't think that's specific to something that's manufacturing based, but it's definitively going to be your large companies that can keep their current operations on a flow and keep them working while they deploy this new technology, right? Because it is a technology, it is new. You do have to have a dedication to it. I mean, as with any project, to be able to make sure that it gets up and running correctly. So it is, if we look at our primary customers right now, it is those large organizations. And specifically the ones that are in labor droughts, let's say, because I mean, there are definitively parts of the world right now that are having a very hard time filling warehouse, distribution center, manufacturing jobs.
Mm.
Everybody wants to be an influencer now. They don't want to, they don't want to lift a box.
Yeah, it's long been a bit of a disconnect, particularly in North America. There's a strong political will to have manufacturing jobs come back. And politically, I think people have one vision of what that actually is. And in reality, the jobs that are in demand in the manufacturing space are quite a bit different often. And frankly, the people
Sure,
just aren't there to do them.
sure.
Both on the ones that are more laborious as well as the ones that are more high tech. I mean, they both present their
Yeah.
challenges. Yeah.
How are you seeking out, these large leader type organizations who are, susceptible or interested in hearing the messaging you're putting forward to get more people thinking about robots?
It's really, really easy because robot saturation is still so low. So, you can honestly, you know, I hate to say this because it'll make my job seem like a cakewalk, but honestly, you could kind of close your eyes and point to a map and boom, you're going to hit warehouses, you're going to hit distribution centers, and the chances of them having a robot are very low. Right. I mean, we're in the, I don't want to say we're in the infancy of adoption, but it's the nascent stages of adoption right now. Automatic guided vehicles have been around for a very long time, but what's made the shift and what's so totally different now is that, with a true AGV, automatic guided vehicle, you needed magnetic tape, you needed reflectors, you needed QR codes on the ceiling, right? So, I mean, that left you in more of a green field situation, right? Where it was when people were creating a new warehouse, they were accommodating for all of these infrastructure changes that needed to occur to be able to bring in these automatic guided vehicles. What BALYO does specifically, and we are only one of a handful of companies that actually do this, is that the brains are built on board, right? No magnetic tapes, no strips, no reflectors, nothing to your infrastructure. All the brains are on board, as I like to say. If I'm being pithy with things, I say we're brawn and brains combined with the robots that we build. So, enough strength and power to lift, and then, the intelligence inside to be able to guide itself around your warehouse or your distribution center environment using basically LiDAR and SLAM navigation.
So I appreciate that you could pretty much throw a dart at a map and you're going to hit a warehouse that could potentially use what you sell, but you still have to get in the door and talk to them. So is it largely just trying to get the sales folks to knock on the doors, or do we have something a little bit more advanced at play?
We have something a little bit more advanced. Obviously, we're basically really uplifting the digital prowess of what we do and making sure that there's a high qualification of who we go after. So, it's I wouldn't say that we're at the point yet where we're purely in an ABM state, an account-based marketing state. But we're certainly hyper selective of those organizations that we're picking up the phone and we're making the calls to. And we want them to be scalable as well, right? We want those organizations to be able to say, okay, we've bought one robot, we've tested it out, now let's get ready to deploy our fleet of 10. So, I mean, I don't want to say we're turning people away, but we cautiously vet to make sure that they're the right organization for a robotic solution.
That's a nice place to be in.
It really is.
Yeah, helps keep the polarity of the sale coming your way a little bit, which is nice.
There's a lot of interest. I mean, there's, the robot market is going to grow. The robot market has grown, tenfold over the past 10 years, and it's going to grow another 10, 20-fold over the next 10 years. If you look at what, all the prognosticators say when they look into their crystal ball. So I mean, there is that hyper interest in it, but we want to do what's right for the organization as well as what's right for BALYO. So I mean, there's part of it that really does require that kind of careful vetting to make sure that they are robot ready, or to use a term from Seinfeld, let's say robot worthy.
Oh man, if you do put trade publication ads together, that has to be the tagline. Are you robot worthy?
Can I tell you though, it does not transcend does not transcend across all geographies, and it can be a very uncomfortable conversation to explain, the sponge-worthy reference from Seinfeld.
I can imagine those conversations. It just
Yeah,
flew in town and offended everybody in the first 3 seconds.
exactly. Yeah. Bonjour.
Are you robot worthy? Yeah.
To be fair, robot ready is a little bit more flows off
Yeah.
the tongue quite nicely. So some options beyond the scalable, flexible cloud that you had to say for 15 years or whatever.
Exactly. Well, and again, with the software and IT, there was just this sea of sameness that I could not get past. That it was, no matter who you went to, that's what they were putting as their buzzwords into the advertising.
Jeff, you had a question, I think, before I interrupted you.
The scale and cloud thing is the equivalent of the sustainable green and everything else that you see in the sea of sameness in like packaging manufacturers that we certainly see. It is really hard for people to kind of separate from their competition when it's people, quality, and service are your core competencies, or put.
I was just going to say, I have a theory on that. Search has been one of the greatest door openers for marketing, but it has also been one of the drivers for us all to produce this sea of pablum that we're forcing people to imbibe, because we're all trying to capture this small core set of keywords. And so we all go running after chasing them. It's like when I look at Twitter or Instagram and I look at hashtags, because when hashtags first came out, every executive was breathing down your neck. Oh, we got to capitalize on hashtags. We got to capitalize on hashtags. And I just said, but look at the hashtags. Look at who's sharing them. It was just this self-serving circle of marketers that, when you scroll through the first 20 mentions of the hashtag, it was all marketers, no buyers, right? So I mean, we were all kind of almost chasing our tails in regards to kind of capturing that zeitgeist of the moment. But were we really? Yeah, I have a much dirtier term that I'm not going to say on the podcast for this, but of how we were all just kind of talking to one another, right? Then rather than actually talking to the market. But that same sea of words, and it goes for the flexible, scalable, and cloud as well. I mean, that's a direct result of search and us trying to capitalize on just a small set of keywords that have the highest search density.
So it begs the question, because I would have to think anybody else selling robotic technology into warehouses is using the same value prop. They can save a savings over time, total cost of ownership, especially versus staff, the safety components, etc. How are you thinking about distinguishing your firm from that sea of sameness in that space?
Really, it's the simplicity of change. And I'd say where we are unique in this regard is that we're building the tools to make the deployment of those benefits easier. Right. I mean, there's, from costing and scoping out a project to actually, building the software and building the logic behind, what makes how the robot moves around the warehouse, how it lifts, how it places, where it does all these activities, where it does the transfers. Who's going to win in this regard is the person that can make it most easy and self-serving for the client. So, I mean, obviously there's this time where you're working together and you're a partner, but at a certain point in time, you also have to have that handoff. So whoever builds the tools in place that are going to make that handoff the easiest and make the organization the most self-sufficient moving forward with building and maintaining the robots or managing the robots, that's the person that's going to win. And that's one of the reasons, that was one of my first thoughts when BALYO approached me, obviously, was, I kind of looked at that. And then when we talked a little bit more, that ideal of our CEO to be able to make this something that is so easy to manage, so easy to run within the environment as using a timesheet and flipping an on switch, which is what they're doing today from a manual standpoint. That's who's actually going to differentiate, and that's who's going to lead the pack. And as I said, this infrastructureless, this way of the brains on board for the robot, that is unique.
I think it's pretty interesting for people to think about that, like the notion of we're basically saying we're going to invest in competitive differentiation that really comes to life in the onboarding kind of early adoption phase, but you're not going to get this benefit until post purchase, right? It's like something that happens after the buy stage, but we're going to use that as our way to win and promote that obviously in our earlier awareness stages of the buying journey. It's just an interesting way of thinking about it. I mean, yes, I've heard lots about ease of use, ease of implementation, or ease of change management um, uh, being a hook, but I guess I hadn't really thought about it through the lens of that full kind of 13, 14 stage B2B buyer's journey and just how far down that we are when we're talking about onboarding, but how it can impact early.
And I think where we get lost in this whole buyer journey conversation, because, especially when I was with the agency, I mean, I've done, thousands of content maps. Where we get lost and where we get misguided in the buyer journey is that sometimes we have to bring that lower level up to the forefront, right? It's not enough to simply try to get away with three key terms in your awareness phase, right? Sometimes you really do have to get into the nitty gritty at a higher level, right? I mean, we get so averse to talking about features and functionalities these days in the awareness phase, and I just think that's myopic of us as marketers to think that. And also, we have to realize that people are in all fluxes of all stages right now, right? I mean, the funnel we've known has been dead for years. It is absolutely an intricate web that we're looking at from a buyer journey standpoint, with the user in the middle, going wherever the hell they please, right? I mean, awareness, consideration, evaluation, purchase, they all almost overlap on top of each other. And the other thing we have to be very aware of is that it's happening much faster than marketing can react to it, right? People are moving from that awareness to that consideration, to that evaluation, to that purchase way quicker than we can build assets, way quicker than we can even get in front of them. It's almost when you launch something, when you launch a campaign, when you launch your plan, you almost have to have it all at once. You can't even build it in phases anymore as a marketer.
Yeah, because you're going to have people at those various phases from the get go. You know,
People are
yeah, who
starting from
are
different places. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and much of what you're trying to tout, or much of what you're trying to, espouse, let's say in this education phase, there's 20 other sites that have done it already, right? I mean, unless you have something that's really unique and really new to the market, there's 20 other places that the users are going to get that information, and they're going to trust that information a hell of a lot more than if it's coming from a company.
Hmm. I do think what you said a moment ago is worth emphasizing. Is there are an awful lot of marketers who are pushed to talk about deep features and all of that at every stage of the journey, whether they're educating or, informing somebody who's already kind of made the decision to make this kind of purchase, but maybe not with your specific brand. Like choosing when to roll out information and not giving too much away too soon is just it's a bit of an art, I would say.
Oh, it's absolutely an art. It's absolutely a science. And in my experience, and again, this was, again, we're great learning experience from the agency standpoint because I was able to look at and work with 25, 30 different companies. It really boils down to time and budget, how much you try to stuff and cram into each part of the journey, right? I mean, if you've only have the budget, you only have the time to produce 2 assets that year. Yeah, you're going to produce documents that are 12 pages long and cover almost every stage of the journey in one document.
I think too, it's important to recognize the further you move into that, if we think about the awareness stage of a buying journey and kind of break it down a little bit, choosing to be active in the more unaware stages of that journey, comes at a cost that's higher than the cost of being active in later parts of the buying journey as a marketer. I think that marketers sometimes it's easy to get excited about, oh, we're going to do the missionary work, we're going to educate the market. And it's like, yeah, you don't have the budget to educate the market. You can't afford to educate the market. You're not IBM. IBM could educate the market, right?
Right, and could spend all day doing. No, that's a great point, Carman. It's there's the 2 things you need to consider. There's the message that you're going to deliver, and then there's the tactics of how you're going to deliver it. And it's really in the awareness phase, the tactics are so costly that you can't have a ton of messages at your disposal. So you have to be very careful.
Well, look, we could go on forever, but we are probably reaching the end of the show today. I'm curious, Rob, you've been at this a while, and you've seen some stuff in tech and software. You're now in the more manufacturing space, although I appreciate certainly not industrial manufacturing per se. But I guess I'm just curious if you had the benefit of being able to go back and tell the young Rob who was just starting out in marketing, give them some advice, what would you give them?
My advice would be, that's a great question. Make sure you stay focused on the trends in technology, which is something that I've always done because I'm kind of a nerd. I mean, as we were prepping for the podcast, obviously I was talking about video games for the first, 10 minutes we got on the call with each other. So I mean, I love the technology to begin with, but I mean, that is really what I would tell my younger self is that, don't be afraid to experiment with something new and to push that envelope. We get so lost and so mired in results and immediate and fast return on investment that sometimes that you can't spend the time you need to with the new marketing technologies that come at your disposal. Also, I would tell myself, don't fall for false promises because, if I can count the number of hours that I wasted on Facebook campaigns with a certain organization because we thought it was going to be the end all be all, I would like to get those moments of my life back.
If not the money.
No, the money, most assuredly.
It's gone. Oh, man.
We helped. I helped pay for development of the metaverse. Let's put it that way.
I think we've all paid a bit of a tax on that at some point.
Exactly right. Hey, I've enjoyed the chat today. Thanks, Rob.
So have I. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to The Kula Ring with Carman Perry and Jeff White. Don't miss a single manufacturing marketing insight. Subscribe now at kulapartners.com/The Kula Ring. That's KULApartners.com/The Kula Ring.